The first time I noticed something was wrong, I blamed the weather. It had been a dry week in Maple Ridge Estates. That much was true. But dry or not, my front lawn wasn't supposed to look like it had just survived a desert marathon. I was an irrigation engineer, for crying out loud. My grass was watered by a precision-calibrated system I built myself. Moisture levels monitored. Schedules optimized. Every sprinkler positioned like a sniper with a hydration mission. So why? Was my lawn browning at the edges like a neglected slice of toast, while Cheryl's front yard looked like Eden on steroids? Cheryl, the president of our HOA. The woman who once fined a retired Marine for putting a flamingo lawn ornament outside during a non-sanctioned season. The same Cheryl who submitted a motion to ban porch wind chimes because they provoked emotional instability. Her garden, of course, was a shrine. Roses imported from Holland. Paving stones sourced from authentic Mediterranean quarries. And somehow, in the middle of a water-conscious drought notice, her blooms were thriving like they were fed by baby angels and rainwater hand-delivered by mountain monks. I live alone. No kids. No pets. No hot tub. No spontaneous slip-and-slide parties on weekends. But my monthly water bill had nearly doubled. At first, I approached it logically. Maybe a cracked pipe underground? Faulty moisture sensors? Sabotage by raccoons with a thirst problem? I checked everything. No errors, no leaks. But the sensor data told a different story. Water was being drawn from the system in higher than usual volumes, especially in the early morning hours. I even checked for errors in the code that governed my automated schedule. Still, everything looked perfect, on paper. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But then I remembered who I lived next to. The morning I set up a hidden motion cam near the control valve, I felt ridiculous. Who did surveillance for lawn issues? But this wasn't just about grass. It was about principle. 3 days passed. Nothing. Then, on the fourth day, at exactly 6:57 a.m., it happened. The footage wasn't just revealing, it was insulting. There she was, Cheryl, in her neon coral tracksuit and rhinestone sun visor, strutting across the side of my property like she owned the air itself. She crouched next to my irrigation hookup and, oh yes, attached a splitter. Then she threaded a long, camo green hose beneath the shared fence line and turned the valve like she was seasoning a roast. And then, she looked directly at the camera, smiled, and waved. No mask. No shame. No stealth. It was the HOA equivalent of flipping me the bird while sipping rose. You have to understand something. Cheryl wasn't just a neighborhood nuisance. She was Maple Ridge royalty. She had been HOA president for 4 straight years and ran it like a one-woman monarchy. Challenging her meant inviting inspection notices, passive-aggressive emails, and anonymous HOA complaints about the color of your garden mulch. One guy down the street had to repaint his mailbox 4 times because it clashed with seasonal tones. So no, I didn't storm over and demand answers. Instead, I decided to engineer justice. My system already had zone switching, and with a few modifications and some late-night tubing reconfiguration, I created what I lovingly dubbed Project Purple Rain. First, I rigged a bypass valve that I could activate remotely. Then I filled the secondary line with a non-toxic landscaping dye, deep violet, and a solution of highly concentrated white vinegar. Both safe, technically, but if used in excess, well, let's just say roses don't like acidic rainbows. For flair, I added a trace of sulfur compound, like the scent used in natural gas detection. Just enough to make the water smell off. I watched from my kitchen the next morning with a cup of coffee and the biggest grin I'd worn in months. At 7 a.m. sharp, Cheryl's borrowed water system activated. The scream that followed sounded like a soap opera actress discovering a secret twin. I stepped outside casually and saw it. Her precious white rose bushes stained in streaks of rich purple, the stone path coated in what looked like spilled sangria. Her guests, yes, guests, stood in stunned silence. Several were HOA board members. One even took out their phone to record. Cheryl turned and stomped toward me, purple-gloved, splashed, and furious. "What did you do?" she screeched, brandishing a soggy glove like a murder weapon. I took a slow sip of coffee. "Looks like you've got a contamination issue. Happens when someone cross-connects irrigation lines without a backflow preventer. It's all very technical." Her jaw dropped. She spluttered something about reporting me. I smiled wider. "Oh, please do. She stormed off in a cloud of rage and sulfur, shouting something about bylaws and vengeance. But that was just the beginning. Because Cheryl didn't understand one thing. When you steal from an engineer, you don't just get payback. You get a prototype. It turns out that revenge, like irrigation, is best when it's automated. The purple splashdown at Cheryl's tea party had done its job. Her reputation, previously pristine and heavily mulched, had begun to wither. But I knew Cheryl too well. Humiliation didn't soften her, it calcified her bitterness. The next day, an official HOA complaint landed in my inbox like a dead crow on the porch. Subject: malicious contamination of community water supply. Filed by President Cheryl D. Larrabee. The language was a fever dream of melodrama. She claimed that I had conducted a chemical warfare operation on neighborhood flora and accused me of eco-terrorism via artificially enhanced liquids. She even cited a bylaw about intentional disruption of landscape continuity, which I'm pretty sure she invented. Still, HOA politics demanded formal appearances. A board hearing was scheduled. I didn't flinch. I arrived early, coffee in hand, laptop fully loaded, surveillance footage, timestamped, system diagrams, printed and tabbed. I wore a green polo embroidered with my company's logo, Aqualogic Solutions, science that grows. Subtle, but pointed. Cheryl showed up 15 minutes late, wrapped in a scarf, oversized sunglasses hiding what I can only assume were panic-induced crow's feet. The boardroom was a converted pool house, acoustics terrible, tension worse. But the moment I hit play on the footage, her attaching the hose, turning the valve, grinning like a thief on holiday, the mood shifted. Dave, a retired firefighter and the board's token voice of reason, let out a low whistle. Well, damn, Cheryl. She didn't even try denial. Instead, she claimed it was a temporary emergency measure during a neighborhood drought response effort. When asked who approved it, she pointed at me. At the potluck, she said with great confidence. I calmly reminded the board that I had not attended said potluck. I was, in fact, disinvited for bringing chili with beans, which she deemed culturally disruptive. The room fell quiet. Dave chuckled. The board couldn't fine her, not yet. Water theft wasn't technically listed in the HOA violations guidebook, but they issued a formal censure and a trespassing warning against her. In HOA terms, that was one level below exile. But I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Because Cheryl was like a bad irrigation valve. When you thought you'd shut her off, she'd find a new leak to crawl through. 2 mornings later, I noticed a new connector near my irrigation main. My previous lock had vanished, replaced by a strange off-brand coupler concealed under gravel. She had done it again. Only this time, she tried to cover her tracks. Unfortunately for her, I'd upgraded. Pressure sensors, flow monitors, water composition scanners that uploaded directly to my home server. My system now had more fail-safes than a NASA test launch. And it didn't just detect water theft, it snitched in real time. At 6:52 a.m., I got a push notification. Alert, unauthorized draw detected. By 6:55 a.m., I was watching from my monitor, coffee in one hand, remote app in the other. Vinegar mode. On. The result was operatic. Her hose exploded with a violent spray of purple again. Cheryl screamed like she'd been hit with mace. But this time, the pressure had built just enough to cause backflow recoil, spraying her directly in the face. It wasn't just sabotage, it was slapstick theater. I nearly fell out of my chair when, minutes later, her landscaper arrived, saw the purple-streaked yard, sniffed once, and declared, nope, not touching haunted plumbing. Then he peeled out of her driveway like the place was cursed. I thought maybe, just maybe, that would finally break her. But Cheryl wasn't done. Instead of fighting me directly, she launched what she called a community unity initiative. She printed glossy flyers encouraging neighbors to embrace shared resources during a time of ecological strain. Nowhere did it mention her previous siphoning attempts. Instead, she implied that those who didn't share their water were selfish, anti-community, and possibly un-American. And who would monitor this initiative? Why, Cheryl herself, of course. I didn't respond. Not publicly. Not even a peep on the HOA message board. I let her think she was winning. While she plotted, I tweaked my system again. I allowed just enough flow through the hijacked line to make her think it was working. But then I programmed it to shut off randomly. Spray for 20 seconds. Pause. Then 3 minutes. Sputter. Repeat. Her roses began to look confused. Wilted edges. Patchy blooms. Bees hesitated mid-air. It was glorious. Then I filed a private report with the city's environmental health office. Not about theft, but about the backflow contamination risk posed by her illegal hookup. That was the ace. The city takes backflow very seriously. One unprotected hose can potentially infect an entire street's supply. The inspector arrived within a week. By sheer luck, I was home. I led him right to the connection. He followed the hose trail like a hound on a scent, directly into Cheryl's yard. He took photos, made notes, then muttered, "Oh yeah, this is gonna be fun." Within days, Cheryl received a formal citation, a warning, and a $1,500 fine. She tried to spin it as sabotage, claimed I had tampered with her side of the fence, but I handed over everything: system manuals, diagrams, digital logs, even footage of her installing the rogue connector while wearing a hoodie at 2 a.m. By the next HOA meeting, Cheryl had become radioactive. The board had lost patience. The neighbors had begun whispering, and I had one more surprise up my sleeve. A new valve, a new solution, and a very fishy twist. There's a specific kind of satisfaction that comes from knowing someone's downfall is scheduled, literally scheduled, to the minute. According to Cheryl's HOA-wide email blast, her next Unity through Horticulture Garden Showcase would take place on Saturday at 9 a.m. sharp. Finger sandwiches, lavender lemonade, and an open invitation to all Maple Ridge Estates residents to witness the marvel of cooperative gardening. The flyer had a quote from Cheryl beneath her photo, framed in golden filigree. "True neighbors share more than fences, they share futures." I nearly spit out my tea. This wasn't just a party. It was an attempted resurrection, a PR miracle in the making. Cheryl was trying to gaslight the entire neighborhood into believing she was still Queen of Roses and Unity. I let her have it. I let her think her new irrigation connection, this one sneakily run through a modified sprinkler head, was safe. I'd seen her install it myself on my security footage 2 nights prior. Hoodie on, crouching low like a gremlin, dragging a reinforced hose beneath a line of decorative hedges. She even left a decoy gnome nearby, likely to hide the valve from view. But the moment she left, I had updated the code. Not just for revenge. Not for drama. This time, it was for the finale. Her new setup was more invasive than the last, illegal, unregulated, and worse, it presented a serious blowout risk. If she turned it on at the wrong pressure level, the whole thing could backfire, literally. But I didn't want destruction. I wanted something she couldn't clean up with a mop and a new Facebook post. I wanted infamy. So I replaced the purple dye with something stronger, bright orange, hazard sign orange, the kind you see on construction barriers or Halloween vomit. Then, I infused the water with fish emulsion fertilizer. Biodegradable, yes. Non-toxic, of course, but with a scent profile best described as rotting halibut in a microwave. At 8:58 a.m. on Saturday, I left the house wearing joggers and headphones. I circled around to the adjacent cul-de-sac, where I had a full visual line into Cheryl's backyard. My camera zoom lens already focused. Phone in hand. Systems primed. At exactly 9 a.m., the pressure trigger activated. The first sprinkler burst erupted like a geyser from hell. A wide arc of orange, fish-scented sludge sprayed across Cheryl's manicured rose bed, splattering petals, garden stones, and a pair of HOA board members mid-toast. One woman shrieked so loud she startled the sparrows. A man dropped his lemonade and dry-heaved. A child began crying. Even the dog let out a low, confused growl. But Cheryl? She froze. For a brief moment, she seemed to think it would stop. But then the second sprinkler popped. Then a third. And the final one, right in the center of her new harmony zone, exploded with such force that it splashed across her flamingo decor, which now looked like it had been dipped in buffalo sauce. She lunged for the valve. Turned it the wrong way. Boom, another blast, this one straight to her ankle. She staggered backward, flailing like a malfunctioning scarecrow. From my hiding spot, I watched the guests scatter like pigeons from a firecracker. And in that moment, I saw it, the exact second Cheryl knew she had lost. Her face dropped. Her composure cracked. Her legacy, covered in orange slime and scented like low tide, had just been immortalized in 6 different iPhone recordings. Later that afternoon, Dave, the board member with the firefighter past, called an emergency HOA meeting. Not Cheryl. Dave. The power shift was official. This time, the video wasn't hidden. One resident played it straight from their phone, holding it up like it was evidence in a courtroom drama. The title? When Your Water Tastes Like Revenge. The footage went viral on the Nextdoor app. Over 3,000 likes. One comment simply read, This is why engineers shouldn't be crossed. At the meeting, Cheryl attempted to spin the narrative again. Accused me of tampering. Claimed I had built a smart revenge system. She wasn't entirely wrong, but she lacked proof. What she didn't lack was guilt. Because the real question came from Mr. Lopez, an HOA treasurer who rarely spoke up. Why was your system connected to her water line in the first place? Silence. Then whispers. Then, the dam broke. Residents began speaking up, one by one. Quietly at first. Then louder. She had charged extra maintenance fees. Claimed special landscaping surcharges. Sent out violation warnings for non-existent rules. One guy had paid $75 for seasonal bird deterrent services and hadn't seen a single bird all year. And the final nail? The city report. It had arrived the day before. Violations, multiple. Fines, substantial. Liability, hers. The board voted, right there and then, for a full HOA audit. Cheryl tried to object, but no one listened. She didn't even get a gavel bang. She just sat there, stained shoes hidden beneath a floral blouse that no longer looked regal, but ridiculous. The neighborhood had turned. And me? I didn't say a word. I simply walked home, turned on my newly encrypted irrigation system, and watched my own lawn, green, bright, and blissfully drama-free, come to life under the morning sun. The war wasn't over, but the tides had changed. And for once, the only thing flowing in Maple Ridge was justice. A week passed in near-perfect peace. Cheryl had gone eerily quiet. No newsletters. No complaints about non-regulation wind chimes. No last-minute HOA memos taped to mailboxes at midnight. For the first time since moving into Maple Ridge Estates, the neighborhood felt free. But to those of us who understood Cheryl's methods, the silence wasn't peace. It was a warning. The calm before another over-manicured storm. And then, it came. At exactly 2:13 a.m. on a Tuesday, my irrigation app pinged. Soil saturation anomaly detected. I sat up instantly. I trained myself to react to these alerts like they were fire alarms. Pulling up the live feed, I watched as a shadowy figure crept along the side fence. There she was, Cheryl, in pajama pants, a hoodie, and slippers, looking like a suburban cryptid with a wrench. But this time, it wasn't just a stolen connection. She was installing infrastructure. A reinforced hose line snaked from beneath her hydrangeas, connected into a modified sprinkler head on my system. Decorative stones were strategically placed to hide the coupler. And the new component, judging by its size and shape, was a pressure booster. She wasn't just stealing water anymore. She was trying to control the flow. This wasn't theft. This was plumbing terrorism. I watched in disbelief as she tiptoed back across her yard, checked her watch, and disappeared behind her back door. The next morning, I discovered the cherry on top. On the shared community bulletin board near the clubhouse, a laminated poster had appeared. Rose Unity through Landscaping Rose. Brought to you by Cheryl Larrabee. Embrace cooperative irrigation systems for a greener tomorrow. True neighbors don't hoard water, they planned it together. The audacity was almost admirable. She'd turned water theft into a motivational movement. But that pressure booster? That was dangerous. Any miscalculation, and it could rupture both systems, potentially flooding the yards, driveways, or worse, undermining the foundations of the older homes nearby. And as the only licensed engineer in the neighborhood, I'd likely be blamed when things went south. So I did what Cheryl never expected me to do. I waited. Let her system run. Let it breathe. Let it lull her into confidence. I even disabled the dye. Let her get 2 full watering sessions without interference. Then I made the switch. This time, I deployed a new concoction, orange-colored water laced with fish emulsion fertilizer, spiked with a legally allowable amount of trace sulfur, the kind used in natural pest deterrents. It was non-toxic, fully within environmental codes, but smelled like a seafood dumpster on a summer day in Phoenix. I monitored the saturation levels, timed the release, and I waited for her next community event. She had mentioned it, loudly, during a conversation at the mailbox with Mrs. Delacroix. Something about a garden reveal brunch and light refreshments among the roses. I scheduled the release for 9 a.m. Again, when the moment came, I didn't watch from the shadows. This time, I stood across the street, trimming a bonsai with absurd focus. At 9:02 a.m., the first sprinkler activated. The second followed. Then the third unleashed a beautiful, symmetrical arc of orange sludge over her white gravel, hydrangeas, and centerpiece rose trellis. The reaction was immediate. A child screamed. A woman dropped her mimosa. A man gagged audibly and muttered, "Is that fish?" Cheryl rushed to shut off the valve and twisted the wrong direction. Again, a jet of orange fluid hit her directly in the shins, and she slipped on her own soaked marble path, landing with a soggy thud. Even from across the street, I could smell it. I didn't smile. I didn't laugh. I just watched as the HOA members and attendants began whispering and stepping back, like her garden had become a biological hazard. And then, like divine timing, the city inspector returned. He had been dispatched after my previous report triggered a follow-up. He saw the fishy flood, the illegal pump, and Cheryl herself soaked in a cloud of orange stench. The man didn't even need to ask questions. He just took pictures. And then he left. Hours later, Cheryl sent out a neighborhood-wide email. Subject line: emergency clarification regarding rumors and malfunctions. She blamed unauthorized tampering, accused an unnamed neighbor with an overactive irrigation complex, and insisted she had contacted legal counsel. That afternoon, she called an impromptu HOA emergency meeting. Only 3 people showed up: herself, Dave, and, by obligation, me. For 10 minutes, she delivered a theatrical monologue. Accusations, allegations, threats of legal action. The term horticultural terrorism was used no fewer than 6 times. She even pulled out a handwritten cease and desist letter, pinned in glitter gel pen on floral stationery. It smelled faintly of lavender and desperation. When she finished, Dave, cool as always, turned to me. "You got video again?" I nodded. He nodded back. Meeting adjourned. 2 days later, the board voted unanimously to remove Cheryl from her position. It was swift, decisive, and silent. That night, her house went dark. No porch lights. No HOA flyers on doors. Just shadows behind drawn curtains. Cheryl was gone. Not physically yet, but politically? She had become a ghost. A soggy, fish-scented relic of a war she had no business starting. For a while, it felt like peace had finally returned to Maple Ridge Estates. No unannounced inspections. No passive-aggressive flyers about mailbox height. No HOA drama disguised as community improvement initiatives. The grass was greener, the sidewalks quieter, and for the first time in months, people lingered during walks instead of power walking past each other with HOA-fueled paranoia. Cheryl's house remained shuttered, her windows curtained like stage props from a play that had closed early. The once pristine yard slowly began to fray, brown edges on her manicured hedges, the roses fading into brittle silence. Her once prized lawn flamingo leaned sideways like a wounded soldier. The neighborhood, without her iron grip, had exhaled. And yet, those of us who had lived through her reign knew better than to declare victory too soon. Then, just as the final petals of winter melted into spring, it happened. A final move. An envelope. Hand-delivered to every mailbox on the block. No name. No return address. Just tape, perfectly centered, sealing each letter shut like a confession in a courtroom drama. Inside was a typed message, written in an overly formal serif font. It opened like a resignation, but read more like a threat cloaked in disappointment. To those who have chosen discord over decorum, I depart not in defeat, but in disillusionment. The soil of this community has proven infertile for the roses of progress. May your grass grow wild and your property values shrink. Regards. Cheryl D. Larrabee, Founding President, Maple Ridge Estates HOA. Visionary. Steward. Martyr. It was signed in cursive. The word martyr was underlined. I laughed so hard I spilled coffee on the note. Others did too. You could hear it, snorts of disbelief echoing from porches up and down the street. One neighbor read hers aloud to her golden retriever. Someone pinned a copy to the community bulletin board with the caption, "This aged like expired salad." 2 days later, the moving truck arrived. It was oddly quiet. Cheryl didn't yell. She didn't cry. She didn't curse the heavens about improper curbside etiquette. She simply loaded box after box, her once immaculate patio furniture now wrapped in blue tarp and regret. Among the last items placed in the truck was the infamous hose, still coiled, still faintly streaked in orange and purple. Like a battle flag from a war she'd lost and refused to surrender. A few of us gathered at a polite distance. Nobody waved, but everyone watched. As the truck pulled away, someone on their porch muttered, "So, who's running for HOA president?" Everyone turned to Dave. He didn't say yes. He just raised a beer in silent agreement. Within a week, the board passed new resolutions. No unauthorized irrigation access. No landscape fines without board approval. And most notably, no single person may serve more than one term as HOA president. Balance restored. But the final twist wasn't Cheryl's departure. It was what came next. One morning, a small cardboard box appeared on my porch. No return label. No name. Just a sticker on the top that read, "Love the fish move. Let's collaborate next time." Inside was a plastic flamingo painted purple and orange. Stained on purpose. Stylized with flair. Beneath it, a note from a fellow HOA survivor. I laughed, not just at the gift, but at the idea that somewhere out there, another homeowner had once fought their own battle against the HOA dragons of suburbia and come out smiling. The next week, a young couple moved into Cheryl's old house. They had 2 rescue dogs, a hammock on the porch, and 0 clipboards. I welcomed them with lemon muffins and iced tea. When they asked about the odd stain near the rose bed, I just smiled. "That's part of a local legend," I said. "You'll hear it eventually." They laughed. The dogs barked at my gnome. It felt good. That night, I sat on my porch, sipping from a cold glass as the sprinklers kicked on, timed, calibrated, efficient. My lawn shimmered under the moonlight, watered by peace and pressure sensors. For the first time in what felt like forever, everything felt balanced again. Still, as the wind rustled the hedges, I caught a faint ping from the motion sensor near the fence. Probably a rabbit. Maybe a breeze. But just in case. I reached over and gave the gnome a nod. Because if this whole experience had taught me anything, it was this. Every garden needs sunlight. Every lawn needs water. And every neighborhood needs someone watching the pipes.